I'm Carly Steele here at South by Southwest in partnership with Kinolime, talking to some of the festival's top storytellers all about their filmmaking process and how they broke into the industry. Let's make movies together. So welcome to South by Southwest. I know you've been hanging out for a little bit, but tell everyone what brings you here this year.
I'm here with actually two films. I had this Closeness by Kit Zahar, which I produced, and Cora Bora, which I produced and wrote, which is premiering tonight.
And how is the difference between being writer-producer and just producer?
Well, it's a lot less work in some ways to be the producer because you don't have the weight of the script. You know, it starts with the script, and so no matter what happens at the end of the line, they can trace any problem back to the script. It's kind of nice to not have the responsibility. You don't get the glory either, but you know, there's a lot of crossover because we're a very hands-on production company. My company, Neon Heart Productions. So we get very involved in the script writing process with our artists that we work with. But it was kind of nice to just put on my writer hat, which is what I started off as a writer. And I use my writing skills to help as a producer to make the script. I'm like, if we're gonna make this, let's get the script like shiny, you know? So, but it was nice to be able to have some time and just write and just like have that part of myself be like out there on the page, and then to work with someone else directing and have them interpret it and take some of the weight off of me, /blame, /glory. When it's awesome, blame if anything's not good. So, it's a different level of pressure, a different level of creative expression, obviously. The writing is a lot more personal. But.
So tell me about your process of writing Cora Bora. How did it start?
Well, I went on a Tinder date with this really fun, weird guy. And he told me a funny story about his open relationship that was failing, and he tried to save it, and it was a disaster. And I was like, this is a movie. This is not a relationship that's going to happen between you and I, even though I think you're great. But this is a really great story. And so I kind of took that as the skeleton for it. And like the original script said, based on a true story, based on a Tinder date I went on, just about someone who basically reaches. His story was so great because it was like the nadir of his relationship. And I was like, I think we've all had that. It's like, that was the night where I stopped doing coke, or like where I stopped doing, changed my life. Like, this is not good. And just his openness. And he reminded me of a few friends I had. I was like, I feel like they have similar stories. So the main character is called Cora Bora, and Cora is the main character, and she's a conglomerate of all my free loving friends who sort of fumble their way through lives, and they hit this moment where it's like, okay, now I need to get it together. I was like, I think that's something universal that everyone can relate to. So it just that was the seed for it, and obviously it's quite different in that it's a female lead character. But that was basically the nugget for it, and then just taking stuff from your personal life and the people that you love and admire and the stories you hear and combining them, and then working with the director, with Hannah Perlett, who's an amazing storyteller. So she brought more of a dramatic edge to it as well. So the original script was very comedy oriented. I'm like, broad. And then she's like, let's go deeper. And I was like, but that's scary. That's vulnerable. And she's like, yeah, that's movie making. I'm like, okay. So did a little digging into my own history. I used to be a musician in Portland, and that's the scene of the setting of the movie. And just reasons why I had to leave, and kind of incorporating that into the story, which made it a lot more hefty, which was nice. And it's something I've always wanted as a writer, and it's really hard to get there. When you're a screenwriter, it's really hard to dig that deep because it's so personal and it's so vulnerable. And you're like, I'd rather crack jokes for an hour and a half, than be like, yeah, I had something really hard happen and I had to deal with it, and I've never been the same since. here you go. What do you think? Is it funny? Like, do you like it? So, that was the process. It was a long process, actually. I started the script a while ago. You write like 40 pages. You're like, I'm a genius. And you're like, I'm out of ideas. Like, I gotta sit for
that midpoint, that act two dirge. Oh my God.
Sometimes it's a very long. I'm like, pandemic. Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. So how long did it take you from writing it to go from script to screen to getting it made?
Honestly, once it was actually done, when I handed it to my producer, Tristan Scott Barons, who's like amazing, like my partner, he was like, this, and this. He works for my production company, but he's also a filmmaker in the general sense. He's a director and producer. And once we started putting those things in place, and he's like, I know this director who's like gonna take it to the next level, and hooked us up with Hannah and Mallory, the team behind on the producer side. It was actually pretty fast, like probably 6 months. It was the pandemic, so it was like kind of 6 months of like tweaking the script and making it more, Hannah's like an auteur, so it had to be more her and less me, but not in a bad way. And we got our lead, Meg Stalter, who's freaking amazing, attached really early on, which was great because then we had real clarity. She's such a person, she's on Hack, she's like kind of a breakout star, and like she's actually one of the most ridiculously nice people I've ever met, but she plays like kind of an asshole. The movie, she's kind of an asshole, but like just working with her, like knowing that she was going to play the main character kind of made it like, and then also made the casting really fall into place. Everyone wanted to work with her, and everyone knew, we're like, okay, we know what this movie is because Meg's the star and this is like what she's going to do with it. So yeah, there was some bumps just because everything was coming out of COVID, and so people are like, oh hey, I got that Marvel movie, sorry. And we're like, okay, yeah, they pay a little better. Yeah, I get it. You get to wear a cape or whatever. That's cool. Thank you. But we ended up, the movie did not suffer. We have, I can't imagine any role played by anybody other than who we got. Like it's ended up being like amazing. So,
did you always have this team in play? Like, how did you sell your first script?
This is the first one that I actually got paid for. Happens every once in a while, you guys. Yeah. Yes. So I was like, wow, that feels really weird to have money coming in this time. Other stuff that I've done, I've just sort of self-produced in the past. So it was really because Hannah was a more established director, getting connected with her, and her producers like also works on like much bigger budget things. So there was sort of like, we're in the very indie world. Like with Neon Heart, we did like Shiva Baby, came here a couple of years ago, and then this Closeness, which premiered the other night. Very small, awesome, great movie, very small movie. I
feel you've got the festival circus, especially South by Southwest, on wrap. Like, what advice do you have for other screenwriters who want to get their movies made and premiered at a festival like this?
I think, first of all, remember to bring a jacket, as you said, because the weather is very unpredictable in Austin. Yesterday it was 1,000 degrees, today is not. It's funny, actually, the person who did our Q&A, the guy who wrote I Love My Dad, and I'm sorry, I have pregnancy brain, and I'm blanking on his name, it was very sweet, he did the Q&A for this Closeness, and I was talking to him about, like, what a life-changing experience it is. And he just makes the movie. He's like, my first movie was $10,000. Like, this is, like, you just make what's accessible, make what's in your life, make what your friends can help you do. Make the script good before you drag all your friends into your project, before you ask your grandparents if you can use their cabin for your, like get the script as good as possible. The writing is free. So get the script as good as possible. Share it with people. Don't be precious about it. Take notes. Put your ego aside. Take the notes. If 10 people are telling you different things, take the note that something's not working. And I've had, like, as a producer, writers that I work with, I'm like, this isn't working, try this, and they don't try it. I'm like, oh, my feelings are hurt. I was like, but they got the note that I was like, but what you did is actually better. You get the note that something wasn't working, and you did your own creative fix on it, and that's great. So getting the script, like, really, don't build the plane in the sky, as someone told me the other day. Like, don't be like halfway through production and be like, how about it's a mystery? And like, trust me, I've heard everything. I've heard all sorts of, yeah. So just having having something accessible and just do the work, make the film. Like, don't start off with your $20 million film. If you only have one idea, then this is not for you anyway. You should have 10 ideas and one of them should be doable. Yeah. And that's the first one. And like, think about who you want to be as an artist. Like, I know that comedies, like, I'm like glad that my first bigger film that's like premiering here is comedy, because that's really where I want to be, mostly for my own writing. As a producer, I do all sorts of different things, but just kind of knowing that you knowing where you want to go and making sure that all your work is sort of building towards that, like giving yourself space to grow and evolve.
There's a real lack of transparency in Hollywood about the screenwriting process and like getting something from script to screen. And it's really, you've got to build that network, build those connections, which I think is really intimidating for a lot of artists. And what's cool, I think, about what Kinolime is doing is democratizing that process. You can upload your scripts, they can be voted on by the people who will actually see them, and then they can be, the ones that are successful can be connected with producers like yourself, who then get to see maybe things they wouldn't have otherwise gotten to see if someone doesn't have like connections. How valuable do you think it is to democratize that process, have more transparency for screenwriters, and do you feel like that would help you find a diamond in the rough to produce?
I mean, beyond even just the quality of the work, because you have everyone able to submit their creativity and not just the privileged few. Just in general, for representation, for like actually having movies that look like the people watching the movies, I think it's literally the most important thing in the entertainment business right now. Like, I think honestly, the iPhone and the cameras and like the accessibility of digital media and the like hacked editing software you can get, like, I think they're so important, because there was such a huge barrier. I mean, you'd have to have so much money back in the day. You'd have to have film and a film camera. Like, it was like crazy, like a huge barrier. And the only people really getting through was a certain type of person, white, straight male, sorry, but that's true. And like, now it's like, I mean, the DSLR cameras are like revolutionary, like they made it possible for anyone with an idea to get it out there. And now we see it's like, oh, it's not just rich dudes who have good ideas. Like, turns out lots of people have beautiful, amazing stories to tell. And once they have the tools to tell it, they're actually getting out there and telling it, and we can see this.
No, it's really, really cool. How do you feel about ChatGPT, and where do you think that's going to change the screenwriting process?
It's funny, I haven't delved too deeply into it because it's really antithetical to my own process. I guess I'm a little skeptical about...
Because you really draw on your own experience, and ChatGPT can only draw on what it's kind of given, which obviously is potentially infinite. But there are things like your personal experiences that it cannot.
And it's the interpretation I wonder about. Like, for me in particular, like, it's these small moments in film that like really turn my head and really like strike a chord with me. And I wonder, when everything's sort of commodified or like generalized through AI, if the ability to recognize, like, how would a computer generated like mentality know that when I see something in a film, where I see a moment where someone reaches for an apple, that my own gestalt of like memories and associations goes all the way back to like toddlerhood, where I'm like, and that was the last time I saw my grandfather, and I remember he said I could have the apple, and like, that's so personal and it's so universal, because we all have these memories that tie us to people in our lives. And like, it's so, I mean, there's no computer like the human brain, like, you can't compare, so I don't know how it would ever, I don't know if the mimicry will ever feel genuine, because I think these moments resonate for us because they're so genuine. So I mean, I won't say no. Like, technology is obviously like miraculous, and like I'm sure the robots will come for us in the end, for sure. I know that, but maybe not yet. And art is one area where I do kind of wonder, like, it is tearing apart the patriarchy and the history of like oppression that our culture has applied to like most of the world, which is good, but what's left is scary, you know, and I think everyone feels that way, whether you're for or against the patriarchy. Yeah, exactly. It's a crazy new world. But I think for artists, as long as you like just keep focusing on those moments, because it's a human connection. Yeah. And maybe a computer can imitate them. And when we use computers to connect with our families, I like FaceTime all the time, you know, like I don't know where I'd be without my child wouldn't know her grandparents if I didn't, because they live on the other side of the country. So I'm not against, but when it comes to actually interpreting the emotional moments or finding those emotional moments, I wonder about the capacity to do that. I wonder about some human capacities to do that, you know?
Everyone's different.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the beauty of art and artists and artistry, which we're celebrating here today. Well, listen, I know you're really busy. You've got 2 projects at the festival. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us and sharing your insights. We really appreciate it, and congratulations on your project.
One extra
thing. Of course.
We were asking about the process of actually useful advice rather than my philosophy on AI. The short to feature model, I can't emphasize enough how important that is. With Shiva Baby, which premiered here and won awards as a short, then she got agents, and then the script got to me as a producer, and then and then she's here with like a much bigger, she did Bottoms that premiered last night, huge fanfare, MGM Studio, you know, like that's the path that I hope for my young filmmakers that I work with. And it's a tried and true method, because you've shown that you can tell a story from start to finish with your short, that you can produce it, that you can get it out there, you've shown that you can do all the things, and then you're ready for your feature.
Sometimes it's harder to do the short. You've got to really distill down your ideas, right?
And that's the point. When I see a good short, I'm like, they know how to tell a story. They can do 1/10 of the movie, then they can do the whole thing. You know, like I can see that. So that's my actual useful advice.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm glad you added that too, because it's super helpful. And thank you for chatting with us. It's been a pleasure.